How does an executive coach and an award-winning author of The Power of Project Leadership move to a new book called How to Do the Inner Work? You want to find out the answer? Join me with my next guest, Susanne Madsen. Let's go.
Hi folks, welcome to the Moving Beyond Being Good podcast by Gary Ryan from Organisations That Matter. In this podcast, Gary shares everything about servant leadership, service leadership, authentic leadership, how to create high performance cultures, service excellence and life balance. Here's your host, Gary Ryan.
Hi Susanne, welcome to the Moving Beyond Being Good podcast.
Hello, and thank you for having me.
It's a delight to have you. I love speaking with fellow leadership coaches and executive coaches and also fellow authors, because you've got an award-winning book titled The Power of Project Leadership. And a few weeks ago, by the time this episode goes live to everyone, you will have published, which is an exciting time for any author, How to Do the Inner Work. Now, those titles are quite different. Can you tell us about the journey to the book that you're releasing just now?
It's such an interesting question. I'll just, for those watching, I might hold them up. So different types, different in stature. Yes, the power of project leadership is kind of what I've been focusing on, I would say, up until, recently, or that's been the majority of the focus of my career, because I used to run big projects in finance, and then I became an independent leadership coach. And I run a lot of leadership programs specifically for people in the project world. So that book, which is now in second edition, and it's even in Chinese and Polish, funnily enough, don't really know how that happened. It's very popular. It keeps being used. And so that's kind of a lot of a big focus of my work is working with managers and project managers who feel overwhelmed, who need to step into leadership because they're very good managers. And so your question about the new one, How to Do the Inner Work, actually, that is not, it's not a business book. It can be read as a business book, but it's not targeted specifically at business leaders. It's much broader. It's really a book about personal development and doing the inner work. And I'm also interested in how it's going to be received by my audience, because it is a bit different. But at the end of the day, I do a lot of one-on-one coaching. Both for people who are on my programs and for people who are not on the programs. And it comes down to, and this is why I wrote it, it is all about doing the inner work as far as I'm concerned. We want something different. We want a different result in the external world. We want a promotion, or we want to lead our teams better, or something different, or a feeling of I'm not fulfilled in my role, or my work-life balance is not there. There is no balance. And it's the inner work. I always say to them, you have to do the work. And so that's what this book is all about. And
it's such an important theme, Susanne, because, I mean, you're probably aware, as I am, from the research from Jack Zenger and his team and Harvard, about the average age of people doing leadership development in organizations is now just a little bit under 47 years of age. It's 46.8 years of age. And in 2012, it was 42 years of age. So in fact, over the last 12 years, the average age of someone being trained in leadership is gone up, not down, despite the average age of leading commencing at around 30, which is maintained, being quite consistent.
Yeah.
And it's like people are leading teams, leading projects, and they haven't done that. In many cases, they haven't done anything. They haven't done anything to develop themselves. They're waiting for their organization to do it. What's been your experience of that part of people waiting for their organization to train them when they're actually in a leadership role?
Yeah, I think you're right. Many of the people on our programs, and I see a clear difference between those who have been exposed to some training and those who have not. And the impact for us is much bigger when we get somebody the first time and when we get them at the right time. Just one simple example, 360 reviews. Sometimes we have people in our programs and they might be, let's say in their 40s. It varies, obviously, but they might be in their 40s, running big projects and very clever, extremely competent. And we do a 360 where they have to get feedback. And it's so eye-opening for them. Some of them it's a big surprise to me that I work for organizations that don't have a feedback culture. And that's already that self-awareness, because to me, the commonality in all of this is the self-awareness. We can't change neither our internal landscape or our external landscape unless we are aware. How do I come across? How do I lead people? What am I feeling right now? Why am I feeling so frustrated with this team member doing or not doing a certain thing? So it's interesting to see people come on these programs who haven't been trained before. It's a real eye-opener. To those who have had some exposure before to leadership training, they are able to go much further because they already have the concepts. They're able to begin to refine how they interact with people. They already understand a bit their personality profile. They understand that not everybody has the same profile as them. I need to adapt my style. Oh my gosh, I'm very technical. My team members may not be. How do I communicate? Or, so there's a clear difference. Yeah. And I completely agree. The earlier you can train people, the better.
Mm. And obviously your book, How to Do the Inner Work, that's something that, as you said, that's more broad than just people in business or in the workplace. That can be anybody, because people have leadership roles as parents. People have leadership roles in their community organizations. People have leadership roles in their religious organizations if they've got a religion, and the list goes on and on. In the arts if they're involved. And so leadership is everywhere, and developing yourself, doing that inner work is absolutely critical. So without giving away all the content in your book, because we want people to go and get it, how have you structured the book, and what are some of the key themes that people are going to explore when they get to do the inner work?
So, it's a really interesting question, because originally I wanted the book to have 2 parts. And my publisher persuaded me that we didn't need the 2 parts. But I still somehow feel that there are 2 parts to it, and I'm interested to hear your view. So, because on the one hand, we need to get clear on what our own values are. We need to really, I think there's a certain element of coaching, meaning that if you want something different in the world, you do need to apply yourself differently. You need to think about it differently. You need to perhaps even look at your feelings about it. And you do need to go and take some action, right? If you're unhappy in your role, what is that really fulfills me? Or a classic example I like to use, somebody who's overwhelmed. Okay, they work too much. They think they have to do it all, know it all themselves. They are probably what I call a hero manager. They're in there, and they're overwhelmed. They do need to figure out, look inwards. What are my beliefs? What is it that compels me to working so hard and not look after my own needs? At the same time, they need to take some external action. Perhaps they need to set some boundaries, for instance. Okay, so a big part of the book is about that. What are my thoughts about a certain topic? What are my thoughts about me? What is it that energizes me? What is it that drains me? Which I call classic coaching, actually. And another part of the book is actually not trying to change something outside of us, but being able to be in what is. And that's much more about mindfulness, because we can't just go and change everything external to us. If I keep getting challenging feedback from my bosses, I change job, I get the same feedback. I change jobs because it's their fault. Well, at some point, I have to realize that I have to sit with what is and be in this uncomfortable feedback. What is it that it's saying about me? So a big part of the book is also about processing my own emotions and being able to figure out what is going on. Using my breath even. Can I use my breath to regulate myself? After I've regulated myself, I can examine, what are my thoughts about this? Is it a one-sided view? What are my feelings about it? So does that make sense? It has these different dimensions, because I don't think it's so simple as never changing something external to you or always doing it.
Absolutely. It's a combination of both. And we absolutely have to address and understand our thoughts, as you mentioned. We definitely have to take action, but we also have to get comfortable through being uncomfortable with who our authentic self is what I would understand you've just said. And the second part there is this, and you just mentioned before about 360s and getting feedback. There can be some characteristics that we have that we may get feedback about that people are actually telling us to change, which in fact we ought not to change. Because in fact, for our authenticity, that is part of who we are. And I'll give you a simple example. One of the things that 360s and feedback is pretty much always told me by some people is I'm too passionate.
Mm.
I'm too passionate. And that my level of passion irritates them, right? Now, I acknowledge that feedback. I'm grateful for that feedback, but in balance, I've decided I'm not going to pull back my passion. I understand there's a group of people in the world that it's going to rub the wrong way. I get that, but in balance, for who it doesn't rub the wrong way, for who it inspires and catalyzes for action, in balance, I'm going to stay authentic and continue to be passionate, as an example.
Yeah, it's brilliant. And again, it shows this absolute thinking about either or. It just doesn't work because there are no absolute answers. And we need to look at each individual situation. What do I need to do? Sometimes we lose ourselves because we want to fit in, right? It's this biggest need that we all have. We want to be loved. We want to be accepted. We want to fit in. And we understand why, because that's how we're wired. That's how we're wired to survive. But what's the price sometimes?
That's right. And
yeah.
In the introduction to my most recent book, Yes for Success, I'll get my pointing right just above me there is, I talk about that I believe every human being on earth was born extraordinary. The moment they were born, any parent on earth knows what I'm talking about when you first hold that child. And they're 100% extraordinary. But a lot of people, by the time they're even 10, or certainly by the time they're 18, they don't believe they're extraordinary. Or by the time they're 30, or by the time they're in their mid-40s and they are a leader, they don't actually believe that they're extraordinary. So doing the inner work can help re-spark what that extraordinary gifts that they have. And discovering that is such a gift through work that you do and that I get to do, that we help people realize. Now, sometimes that means they do need to change careers or they do change jobs. Certainly, we're not advising folks, don't discover that and just give up your job straight away, because you've probably still got a mortgage, you've probably still got school fees, but at least you can get on the journey to finding the place that I talk about. It's at the intersection of your talents and your passions, which I believe once you've done your inner work and you've discovered those things, that intersection is actually quite big in terms of job opportunities and careers, but it's pretty hard to find those roles if you don't know what those things are first, if you haven't done the work. So what are some other aspects of the inner work that people are going to discover in your book, Susanne?
So I have a section actually about what's your programming, because you're right. We go through life, then in the early years, then we get all this programming. And at some point we might come out the other end, early 20s or whatever, not feeling that we are unique or that we have anything particular to offer. We've been told that we're nothing special. We've been told that we're not good at this, or whatever people are being told, that they believe falsely. So that's a big part, is that awareness again, understanding what is my programming. And the thing is, we can't actually just undo our programming.
No.
People say change your limiting beliefs. Yes and no. The trigger is to become aware of it and then choose another belief. We can't just wipe them, but we can become aware of them. And I love what you said about finding the mix between, what did you say, your passions and your talents? What did you say?
Yes, the intersection. If you think to a freeway intersection, this is your talents and this is your passions. It's that intersection.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I have an exercise in the book called the passion circles. And that's after we've been digging deep about what is that limits you, what is that holds you back. Then we look at, okay, I talk about 3 passion circles, and it's like three circles that overlap. And I get people to identify 3 things they're really passionate about. This is, let's say they just want to apply themselves differently in the world. And I said, the first passion, it has to be something that you are good at, something that you master. It has to be the core of your profession. It could be, well, if you're a trained engineer, that's obviously, you're probably still going to use your engineering skills or whatever it is. So that's the first passion. Second passion could be something that a newly acquired skill, something you really want to apply. And the third circle is something that you think you can't actually, it's hard to fit in, but you want to try anyway. So I'll give you an example. In my own case, when I did this technique years ago, when I was still an employee over 12 years ago, my first passion was corporate management or project management, because that was my skill. I was still passionate about that. That I needed to, I wasn't going to throw the corporate world away. I still enjoy working with corporations. And my second circle was coaching. It was a newly acquired skill for me. I qualified as now back in 2009. It's a long time ago. But I was there. What am I going to do with my new skill? And then my third circle, my third passion circle, was well-being and mindfulness and everything else. I put that into this category, well-being, whether it was yoga or whatever. And the idea is to look at what happens when these three circles overlap. So what do you get in my case when you take something corporate management, something with coaching, and something with well-being? Well, that's go figure, right? And that's the sweet spot I've been moving into ever since.
Oh, because it's wonderful you used it, because I've imagined a Venn diagram when that's the sweet spot right in the middle, right, of your three circles. Being an author as well, I know that you had to go through your own programming, and I know it's just your second book, and I know the first book was obviously very well received in the marketplace and highly recognized and respected. It's still a massive undertaking to write a book. No matter what it is, it's a massive undertaking. We were just speaking off air about the doing your audio book version as well, which you've completed with 10 hours in the studio. For most authors, there's some sort of turning point or a major catalyst that gets you to then take the action to do the work to write the book, because that's just a brutal reality. There's a ton of work that has to get done while you're still doing everything else in your life. So what can you tell us about that part of your journey for this book?
For the new book, or because I've actually published three, and the first book I wrote, which was the coaching workbook, before I even set out to, it's 2012, it's a long time ago now. And I had this big aha moment. I was a manager, right? I was an overworked project manager. And this is actually the pivotal moment of my entire career. Back in 2008, it was the week that the Lehman Brothers went bust. I don't know if people still remember, but it was such an important week. It was actually the beginning of the financial crisis. I was invited to attend a leadership program, 5-day leadership program. I was coached for the first time, and I share this in all my books because it's such a pivotal moment for me. And I had that true aha moment. I came to the coaching session thinking, help, I'm exhausted. I am overworked. What should I do? Should I just leave my job, or what should I do? And that's actually what people come to me saying today. And I'm honestly, I'm not lying. Within the space of that 1-hour coaching session, something switched inside of me. I realized that I had the answers myself. I realized that if I decided that I was going to go home at 5 p.m., I could do it. Nobody was actually going to hold me back. It sounds so corny, so simple, but actually, I just realized that it was my own programming that was in my way. And so that's what led me to write my first book back then, and begin to train project managers in leadership. Because my other realization was, gosh, we need more leadership. This is important. So the whole thing about coaching and leadership became important. And so that was a pivotal moment for my first book. My second book, I was very fortunate. I was invited to write it. At that point, just a few years after my first book, I thought, oh my God, another big book, as you're saying. Oh, do I really have the energy? But it's been such a defining book for me, The Power of Project Leadership. So I'm very glad that I took the opportunity and wrote that. The third book, it's been there for a long time. It's just something that I feel I have had to write. It's come from deep within me. I wouldn't say there's been one moment. It's been forming for a long time. This idea of how can we feel good on the inside without having to compromise on what we're doing in the external world? How can we live a fulfilling life? How can we be in the modern world where there are stresses for all of us and still feel fulfilled and peaceful? Because oftentimes external success is at the expense of inner peace, let's say, because you might be fulfilled because you have a great career or you're traveling the world or whatever you're doing, but you're doing it to get away from something inside, like a small part of you. You're trying to fill your void by doing something in the external world. So my interest in the book and in writing how to do the inner work is, well, we want both. We want to live a fulfilling life, and we want to feel peaceful and joyful, right? We don't want to feel stressed because we have to achieve a lot of things. So does that answer your question, Gary?
100%, because I suspected that this book was born a long time ago. That was my guess. Okay. And you've just confirmed that to be accurate, Susanne. And for a book like this, that it just tends to be the case, because as you said, you had to do your own inner work. And therefore you have to get to a place in your life where you're comfortable enough with your own inner work to share a book like this about people doing their own inner work. And how you mentioned for your first book back in 2009, when you had your first 1 hour coaching session, and it was an enlightening experience for you, pivotal for your entire life, as you said, Susanne. This is one of the gaps I see so many people having. And I'm guessing your book's encouraging people to get coaching and mentorship throughout their lives. I'm guessing that because it's such a big gap for so many people. And honestly, in the work that I do and you do, we get to see no one who the world sees as being successful. And if we term that as being people that are actually living the life that they really want to live, and they are having a lot of harmony, and they are having a lot of happiness and fulfillment in their life. So they're not the ones that are missing those bits. They're the ones that have got, you find out time and again that they've sought out coaching and mentoring throughout their lives. They've been willing to invest in their, like literally put their hand in their pocket and invest in their own development without waiting for others to come along and do it for them, because of the gap that can create in their life, and often the unhappiness that can enter their life when that gap is present.
Yes, and fortunately, sometimes it doesn't take much. It takes continual work. It's like weeds in the garden, right? You don't just weed once and they're all gone and your garden will be there for 10 years. It takes continuous work, which is why, yes, we do encourage people to seek support throughout their lives. But some people need a lot of support. Other people, it's a few, like me, it's a few key limitations we uncover, we become aware of. And we're like, wow, right. And with that awareness, we can go and apply ourselves completely differently. It's magic sometimes.
It absolutely is. And one of the things that I encourage and talk about is, given our brain, we're mammals like other mammals. We're an animal, we're a human one. But the way our brains work is still very similar to a lot of other mammals out there. And so I call my brain the beast. Because my beast, like every other human's brain, is so attracted to negativity and how much negativity is accessible and thrown at us. The media knows it. Social media knows it. So the media and social media know that. Advertising know it. We get thrown so much negativity that actually the way our brains work is it creates a lot of the wrong chemicals floating around our bodies all the time. And people, when they're doing the inner work and working on themselves, need to be aware of all of that negativity. And so what I talk about is they've got to feed the beast positivity deliberately. They've got to actually do the programming now. And that's why books like yours, it's wonderful you've got the audio book version that's coming out as well, Susanne, so that people could be, driving, or they can be exercising and they can be listening at the same time, but feeding their beasts some positivity to help them navigate the challenging world that we live in, and to help them get more fulfillment in their life right now because of that positivity. And I've literally switched off the news. I have some sources I go to very briefly to check it, but I figure if there's a major tragedy happen, I'll find out. I don't need to be watching the news on a regular basis for all of the, the 15 negative stories for the one good story that they're going to show. I don't need to be exposed to that.
Yeah, we need to be very deliberate how we are applying ourselves where we are focusing on, what we are focusing on. And also in that negativity, I also see it with sometimes very senior leaders, how they have a lot of self-doubt. So it's always kind of surprised me. I think I'm not so surprised now, because sometimes when we have a lot of inner doubt, we want to achieve more in the external world. But I often compare it to standing on, I take people through this exercise where I get them to imagine they stand on their own personal mountain. So I had this executive once, he was going on a leadership program, and he was an executive. But all the others on the program were also going to be execs. And he felt that his directorship wasn't as big as the other people's directorships. So we did this exercise where he lists out all his strengths, all his experiences. He was at the top of his career. He knew it, but he didn't feel it. So I get people to really feel it in their body. And then to imagine that they're actually standing on this mountain of all their own strengths. And the thing is, you can't see your own mountain very well, but you can very clearly see other people's mountains, right? You can see how tall they are. They're standing over there, or at least that's your perception. So that's part of the inner work as well, really feeling and taking ownership in our heart for those strengths. It doesn't mean that we're perfect. It shouldn't make us arrogant. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about this self-worth and acknowledging, yes, I have a lot to offer. I have a lot of experiences. And I think when we strengthen that, hopefully the negativity, I know you're talking about news and stuff, which is also negative, but also back to the feedback again. When somebody gives me feedback, when I'm not being acknowledged, that in itself, lack of acknowledgement, can trigger people's self-doubt. So we do need to be deliberate and acknowledge ourselves.
Oh, absolutely, Susanne. And the self-doubt, the imposter syndrome, which is sort of what you were discussing just now with your example, is rampant from my experience. That when you really sit down with many leaders and really start to do some inner work, it comes to the surface, the amount of the imposter syndrome and how present it is for them, and how they struggle to truly acknowledge their mountain of strengths as you've described it. And so it's a very, very powerful exercise to get people to do, and to really, as you say, one of the challenges with that is when you're standing on your mountain, you can see how big everyone else's are, but you can't actually see necessarily how big yours is. What would be one or two really strong practical takeaways that you're happy to share in this interview for our viewers and listeners, Susanne, that you've got in the book that they can utilize to help do some of that inner work?
Well, actually, the book has 6 chapters, and each chapter has exercises. I'm actually grateful to my publisher for having me partly rewrite the book to pull out all the exercises. I didn't want to do it because I didn't want the book to be like my previous book, which was more like, it has a lot of exercises in it. But I think, so in total, I think there are 24 exercises. Every chapter has it, and it's in the audio version. And for people actually who purchase the paperback, I have even done some other recordings I put on my website, because that's some of the feedback I got from my early reviewers. They said, well, I'm reading the book, but now you're asking me in an exercise to close my eyes and feel something, or to do a little meditation, which is also, there's some mindfulness in there. Can you not just do an audio part of that? So I did that independently of doing the entire audiobook, which was done in a studio. So that's also a supporting resource out there. So there are many, many different exercises, and some of the reviewers have also said, that's the real strength of the book. So there are exercises from everything about identifying what your limiting beliefs are, what is it that drains you, what is it that energizes you, what are your passions, to exercises about being with challenging emotions, also preparing for challenging conversations, because some people need to set some boundaries and notice their own needs better and express those needs to others. Some exercises, there are some meditations in there, because sometimes when we're overwhelmed, we need to come back to ourselves come into ourselves, be with our breath. The breath in itself can help regulate us probably more than anything else. So I have some breath exercises in there, especially just something as simple as extending our exhale. So making our exhale twice as long as our inhale if we feel overwhelmed with something. So I think there are many different takeaways, and not everybody might enjoy all the different exercises, and that's fine. But it's like a menu, right? And people can take what works for them. If I'm not in the mood to sit and close my eyes right now, fair enough. But the invitation is there.
And at the same time, that is part of the work side of it, though. Like you can't not do the inner work to do the inner work. So
yeah,
I acknowledge what you've just said about maybe people don't have to do all the exercise, but I'd encourage them to do them anyway, just because you've put a lot of thought and experience into those 24 exercises that you've got spread throughout your book to give people those practical experiences and outcomes. So I'm going to be cheering for, hey, folks, even when you think not right, do it anyway. And that's honestly, when you realize that something you're trying to do in life is for your own greater good, and therefore the greater good of the people you're serving in your life, you got to be uncomfortable sometimes and do the work.
Yeah, and actually the very first exercise of the book is just encouraging people to notice themselves, because we're going to go through this inner work book together, right? And there are, as I said, about 24 exercises, and it is inner work. So the very first exercise is just kind of, are you okay being with yourself? Are you noticing what is your inner being telling you right now? Because oftentimes, if we listen long enough, we get the answers. We know what we need differently in our lives. It's just that we don't always want to listen to it because it's uncomfortable. That inner voice might say to you, actually, I'm unhappy in my job right now. We don't have to criticize the job. It doesn't have to be that. Or the voice can say, actually, I have given too much of myself. I've worked too much. Or it might say something completely different. I don't know. But that's part of it. Listen inwards.
Absolutely. And it's interesting that you should say that, because a lot of people believe that in the world we live in today, everyone wants everything in, 60 seconds or less. And we want everything shortened down and not to slow down and spend the time. Yet, interestingly, the fastest growing media in the world at the moment is long form podcasts like this. Stephen Bartlett's The Diary of the CEO. His interviews rarely go less than 2 hours. And yet it's the fastest growing podcast in the world on YouTube.
Yeah, I love it.
So folks listening to us, if you've got that programming in your head that says, hey, can we do this quicker? The answer is actually human beings have slowed down and taken things in their strides to make sense of the world. That makes you faster in the long run. So we go slower to be faster. We've been doing it forever. And our modern world has even created that right now as we speak. I mean, the growth in my own podcast channel, we just tipped over 31,000 subscribers just last night, Australian time. So, that's, I'm very, very thankful for all of the folk that have been doing this. Now, that leads us to our last question in our conversation, Susanne, and that is, what does moving beyond being good mean to you?
Moving beyond being good, I think, is probably being authentic, because I talk about in the book, sometimes we want to do a lot of good in the world. We want to be good. We want to, there's some patterns that are not so good, like the savior pattern. We won't go into that, but we want to give for the right reasons. If I give, which in itself is beautiful, but if I give because I feel inadequate in myself, so I give to feel better, I give because it makes me feel like a more decent human being. Some people continue to give and give and give. They volunteer and they exhaust themselves and they're actually depleted. So I think moving beyond that means that I'm giving from the right place. I'm giving from a place where my cup is full. I'm giving because I have an excess. of love to give, or whatever it is. But mostly actually it should come from a place of love, I think. And so we're giving, because we want to give and we have an excess to give from. And that becomes really beautiful. And that just means, again, we need to fill up our own cup before we can give to others. Put our oxygen mask on ourselves first, because before we try to save somebody else. Then I think with doing all the inner work, we will fill up that cup, and we can give plentiful.
And as you said, as we fill up our cup, and we probably learn to love ourselves again, or for the first time in some people's cases, maybe, then that enables us, as you also said, to love others and to be able to give to others. I really appreciate your perspective on moving beyond being good. And I want to thank you for sharing your time with us. And I'm excited for your book. Again, folks, there'll be all in the show notes for everything on how to do the inner work by Susanne Madsen. And we're going to be able to, again, have everything in the show notes for everyone. I want to thank you for your time. Any last comments for us?
No, just thank you so much. I'm very grateful. I love that you do I always do this, actually. It's just gratefulness. I'm very grateful. Yeah. And to everyone listening, whether you get the book or not, it's important that you do the inner work for you, because you don't want to be held back by limitations that can be removed from you. We all deserve to feel joy, actually, and to give to others freely. Yeah.
Folks, I'm not going to let you off so easy. Get the book. There's all the versions. There's the ebook, there's the paperback version that's got the links as well that you heard from Susanne before. If you've got the audio book version, you've got no excuses. Go and get the book. I also believe in selling, and we've got to be able to sell our wonderful wares, okay? So folks, no letting off the hook from me. Get Susanne's book. Once again, thank you for joining us on the Moving Beyond Being Good podcast. And folks, we look forward to seeing you all, or if you're listening to us, in the next episode. Bye.
Thank you.